The girl at the house stand handed me a laminated badge on a binder clip and told me the volunteers were lining up by the kitchen. The badge said, Veolunia, in plain black letters. My son-in-law looked straight at it, then straight at me, and turned back to the man from the investment group like I was a coat someone had left on a chair. My daughter touched my elbow and said, Dad, just help where they need you, okay? It's a big night. There was no place carved with my name at the long table up front. That was the moment something in me went still and cold, the way the lake gets in late November, right before it freezes over. Real quick, before I get into it, do me a favor and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I want to know this is reaching people who understand what it feels like to become furniture in a life you paid for. I want to be honest with you. I almost didn't make this. A man my age isn't supposed to air his family out in public, but I've spent too many years swallowing things, and I think there's somebody listening who's about to make the same mistake I made, and maybe I can save you the trouble. So let me start at the beginning, or at least the part that matters. My wife passed 4 years ago this past October. 41 years we had. She was the talker, the one who remembered birthdays and sent the cards and kept the family stitched together. After she was gone, the house we'd raised the kids in got real big and real quiet. I'd find myself standing in the kitchen at 6 in the morning with a cup of coffee I didn't want, looking at her handwriting still on the calendar on the fridge. She'd written dentist 2:30 in November for an appointment she never made it to. I couldn't bring myself to flip the page. I was a builder my whole life, started swinging a hammer at 17, ran my own framing crew by 30, and for the last 20 years before I retired I built custom homes outside Asheville. Good ones. The kind where the doors hang true 30 years later and the floors don't squeak. I'm telling you that not to brag, but so you understand who I am. I'm a man who measures twice. I keep the receipts. I read the fine print because in construction the fine print is the difference between a paycheck and a lawsuit. My daughter called me about 8 months after the funeral. She and her husband had this dream, a restaurant, farm to table, the whole thing. Local beef, vegetables from growers up in Madison County, a bar with bourbon you couldn't get anywhere else. She'd worked front of house at nice places for years, and he called himself a chef, though I'd learned later that title was doing a lot of heavy lifting. They'd found a building, an old textile mill down by the river that some developer had half finished and then run out of money on. Beautiful bones, brick and timber and these tall iron frame windows. It's perfect, Dad, she told me on the phone, and her voice cracked a little. It's exactly what we always wanted, but the bank won't touch us. We've got no track record. They want a personal guarantee and collateral we just don't have. I knew what she was asking before she asked it, and God help me, I wanted to say yes before she even finished. Here's the thing nobody tells you about losing your wife. You'd give anything to feel useful to somebody again, to be needed. My son had his own life 2 states over, a teacher, married to a good woman, kids of his own. He called every Sunday. He didn't need rescuing. But my daughter was right there crying on the phone, and she had her mother's voice, and I thought, this is what Carol would want. Take care of your kids. Show up. Be the kind of man people can count on. So I drove over and we walked the building. I'll be honest, the builder in me lit up. I saw what it could be, and I made a decision in about the time it takes most people to decide on lunch. I sold the lake cabin, the one my dad left me, the one Carol and I spent every summer at, where I taught both kids to fish off the dock, $410,000. I took an early distribution off my 401k and a lump sum from my pension and ate the taxes and the penalty without blinking. By the time the dust settled, I'd put in a little north of $700,000. Now, here's where the builder mattered, and you'll see why later. I didn't just hand them a check. I structured it. I bought the mill building outright in my own name through a holding company my lawyer set up. Carol always said I overthought everything, but bear with me. The restaurant would be a separate company, an LLC, and that company would lease the building from me. On top of that, I put cash into the restaurant company itself and took 40% of it. My son-in-law got 35, my daughter got 25. The operating agreement, the rulebook for the company, said any member holding 25% or more had to sign off on big decisions. Selling the company, bringing in new partners, taking on big new money. I didn't write that clause to protect myself from my own daughter. I wrote it because that's just how you build something so it doesn't fall down. You put the load-bearing walls in whether or not you think there's going to be a storm. When we signed the papers, my son-in-law shook my hand with both of his and got teary and said he'd never forget what I'd done for them. My daughter hugged me so hard it hurt and said, "We're partners now, Dad, the three of us." And I believed her. I drove home that night feeling like a man with a purpose again for the first time since the funeral. The first year was the best year I'd had since Carol died. I was there every day. I swung a hammer again, built the bar top myself out of reclaimed heart pine from the mill's old floor joists, sanded it down to glass. You could see your face in it. I built the host stand. I fixed the walk-in cooler when the contractor botched it. The young kids on the kitchen line called me Pop and asked me how to use a level. My son-in-law would put his arm around me at the end of a shift and say, "Couldn't have done this without you, old man." My daughter would slide me a plate of whatever the kitchen was testing and ask what I thought. We opened in the spring. There was a line out the door. There was a write-up in the paper. My son-in-law's face was in the photo, and the article called him a visionary, and I didn't mind one bit. I was just proud. I had my name on the wall in a little brass plate by the door that listed the founders, all three of us. Then his parents started coming around. Her in-laws were a particular kind of people. Money, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having missed a meal in your life. The father had been some executive at a company up north. They'd retired down to a place on the golf course over in Biltmore Forest, and they had opinions, lots of them, about the menu, about the wine list, about the brand. His mother used words like elevated and concept and guest experience. She started showing up to what they were now calling leadership meetings. Meetings I'd somehow stopped getting told about. I noticed it slow, the way you notice a roof starting to sag. A meeting here that nobody mentioned to me. A decision there I found out about after the fact. New uniforms. A new logo that quietly dropped the little tagline I'd suggested. Built to last. I asked my son-in-law about it and he said, "Oh, the brand consultant thought it felt dated, Pop." Brand consultant? We had a brand consultant now. I brought it up to my daughter over coffee one morning, just the two of us before the staff came in. "Honey, I'm a 40% owner and I'm hearing about half of this stuff from the dishwasher." She didn't look at me. She kept wiping down a table that was already clean. "Dad, you know how Derek's mom is. She just likes to be involved. It's easier to let her feel like she's helping. It doesn't mean anything. It means I don't know what's going on in a company I own most of." "You own the building too," she said, and there was something new in her voice, a little flat thing I didn't recognize. "You're getting your rent every month." I let it go. Lord help me, I let it go. I told myself she was tired. The restaurant business is brutal. The hours are inhuman, and she was carrying a lot. I told myself it would settle down. By the end of that first year, the in-laws had set up a little office in the back, and there was a sign on the door, and the sign had her father-in-law's name on it as Strategic Advisor. The second year I started getting introduced wrong. A regional magazine did a feature. Reporter came in, sat at the bar, and my son-in-law walked her around the place telling the origin story, and when they got to me by the host stand, he said, "And this is the dad. He helped us get off the ground early on." The dad. Like I was a guy who'd loaned them his pickup truck for a weekend. Not the founder, not the 40% owner, not the man who literally owned the bricks over their heads. The dad. I started keeping a notebook. Old habit from the construction days. You write down the date, the weather, what got done, who said what, because someday somebody's going to claim something different and you'll need to know. So I wrote it down, the magazine thing. The meetings I wasn't invited to. The morning my son-in-law's mother told a vendor in front of me, "Oh, don't mind him, he's just family," and laughed, "He's just family." That one I underlined. By the third year, they'd stopped pretending. The leadership meetings happened on Tuesday afternoons, which they knew was when I drove down to the VA to volunteer. I read to a couple of old vets there who can't see well anymore, fellas with nobody else coming around. My daughter knew that was sacred to me. She scheduled around it on purpose. I'd get an email after the fact, bullet points, no context. FYI per today's leadership sync. FYI. As if I were a name on a distribution list and not the man whose retirement was holding the whole thing up. I'll tell you the moment my chest first really went tight. I came in on an off day to fix a loose handrail I'd noticed. Couldn't stand to see it wobble. The liability of it kept me up. And I heard my son-in-law on the phone in the back office. The door was cracked. He didn't know I was there. No, he's not really involved at this point, he was saying. He's basically a silent partner. He's an old guy, he putters around, fixes stuff, it makes him feel good. He's not in the weeds on anything operational. We've got full control. Silent partner. An old guy who putters around. I stood there in the hallway with my screwdriver in my hand and I didn't go in. I want you to understand what that costs a man. To hear your own child's husband describe you like a houseplant and to not go in. But Carol used to say I was at my most dangerous when I went quiet, and she was right, and some old instinct told me this was a time to listen, not talk. So I fixed the handrail and I drove home and I wrote it all down, word for word. The thing that broke it open happened 8 months ago. My granddaughter, my son's girl, sweet as anything, she was 11 then. She's good with computers. Way better than me. They'd come down to visit and she was helping me figure out the cloud thing where all my documents go, because I'd been too cheap to pay somebody and too proud to ask. And while she was poking around, she said, "Grandpa, there's a folder here that got shared to you. Did you want this?" It was a folder my daughter had shared to my email address 2 years before and I'd never even seen the notification. And in it, plain as day, was a deck. A pitch deck. Glossy. The kind the in-laws would put together. The cover said, Herd Sheared and Vine. E-expansion and partnership opportunity. And there was a logo I'd never seen for something called the Latimore Hospitality Group. I sent my granddaughter out to the porch with a popsicle and I read every page. They were going to take outside money, a lot of it. The Latimore Group was going to come in, fund 3 new locations, and in exchange they'd take a big chunk of the company. To make room, they'd issue new ownership units, which is a fancy way of saying they'd water down everybody who was already there. There was a table. My 40% would drop to 9. My daughter and son-in-law would keep control because they'd negotiated to. And there was a line item, a footnote really, that I read 4 times to make sure I was reading it right. Founder buyout. Tay. The dad. $95,000. $95,000. To buy me out completely. I had put in over $700,000. The building alone, the one I owned, had appraised the year before for almost $1 million too. And they were going to offer me $95,000 to go away quietly, and the deck made it clear the whole thing was supposed to close around the New Year, with a big announcement at a New Year's Eve gala. A gala. At my restaurant. In my building. I'm going to tell you what I did, and I want you to hear me on this because it matters. I did not call my daughter. I did not blow up. I did not blow up. I did not drive down there and flip a table, much as part of me wanted to. I sat at my kitchen table, and I looked at Carol's handwriting on that old calendar. I still hadn't thrown out, and I asked myself what kind of man I wanted to be when this was over. And then I called my son. He picked up on the first ring like he always does. I told him everything. There was a long quiet on the line, and then he said, "Dad, come stay with us. Just come up here. You don't have to be in the middle of this." "I'm already in the middle of it, son," I said. "I built the middle of it, son," I said. "I built the middle of it. Then let me help you. We've got room. We've always got room." I told him I'd come after I'd handled some things. And then I called a lawyer. Now, the lawyer I found, I just call him my lawyer, a sharp younger fella who'd done construction litigation, understood operating agreements, understood real estate, understood exactly what I was sitting on. We met once a month for half a year in a coffee shop in West Ashiel, and every time I brought a folder, and every time he flipped through it and his eyebrows went up a little higher. "Sir," he said to me at the third meeting, "I have to be honest with you. People in your position usually come to me after they've signed something stupid and there's nothing I can do. You did the opposite. You built yourself a fortress and you didn't even tell anybody it was there. Do you understand the position you're in? Tell me," I said. "They cannot do this deal without you. The operating agreement requires your consent for new partners and for any sale or merger, and you hold 40%. That alone kills it. But it's better than that. You own the building. The restaurant doesn't own its own location. It leases it from you, and the lease is up for renewal this coming year. The Lattimore Group is buying into a company whose single most valuable asset is a building it doesn't control. The minute they do real due diligence, they're going to call your daughter and ask one question. Does the old man know about this? And the answer is going to terrify them. So what do I do?" He smiled, the way a man smiles when he's holding a full house and the other fella just went all in. "Nothing. For now, you let them build the whole thing right up to the edge. You let them spend the money on the gala and the announcement and the press. And then, at exactly the right moment, you remind everyone in that room who actually owns the floor they're standing on. Timing is leverage. Don't waste it early." So that's what I did. I went quiet. The silent partner. The old guy who putters around. For months I played the part they'd written for me, and every Tuesday I read to those old vets of the VA, and every night I went over my folder and I waited. The invitation to the gala came by email. Mass blast, 80-something names on it. "You're invited. Hearth and Vine New Year's Eve celebration, a toast to the future. General admission." There was a link to buy tickets. They were going to charge me $125 to attend a party in a building I owned. I didn't buy a ticket. I didn't RSVP. I just marked the date. I showed up at 9. Doors weren't till 10. I wanted to walk the floor while it was empty, the way I used to walk a house before the family moved in, checking the joints. The place looked beautiful. I'll give them that. They'd strung lights across the iron windows, and the bar top I'd built with my own hands glowed like honey. There was a stage set up at the end of the dining room with a banner, 5 years and the best is yet to come, and below it, smaller, the Lattimore Group logo, the same one from the deck. So it was done. They thought it was done. They thought it was done. I ran my hand along the bar I'd made. I looked at the little brass founder's plate by the door, the one with all 3 of our names. Somebody had taken it down. There was a clean rectangle on the brick where it used to be, a shade lighter than the rest. I'd painted around it for years, and now the absence of it was the only honest thing in the room. That's when the host girl found me and handed me the Valenier badge and told me where the volunteers lined up. The guests came at 10. The Lattimore people came first, a cluster of expensive-looking folks in dark suits, and my son-in-law worked them like a man who'd practiced in the mirror. His parents glided around playing host of an event they didn't own, with money they hadn't earned. My daughter wore a dress that probably cost more than the first truck I ever bought, and she was radiant, and every time her eyes swept past me they kept moving, the way your eyes move past a parking meter. I stood by the window with a plastic cup of the cheap champagne they were giving the general admission folks, while the head table drank from real crystal 20 feet away. I watched them not see me, and I waited. At 11:30, my son-in-law took the stage. Microphone, the whole bit. The room hushed and turned to him. 5 years ago, he said, my wife and I had a dream and a building full of pigeons. Everybody told us a restaurant was a fool's bet, but we believed in something. We built this place from nothing, with our own hands and our own savings, and the support of people who saw what we could become. He gestured at the Lattimore suits. And tonight I'm thrilled to announce that this is just the beginning. From nothing, our own savings, our own hands. I set my plastic cup down on the windowsill. I felt my phone buzz in my jacket pocket. That was my lawyer, right on schedule. The email had gone out. 80-some inboxes in that room had just received a notice on his firm's letterhead. Notice of member rights, lease status, and objection to proposed transaction. It laid the whole thing out in plain legal language, that no sale or new partnership could close without my written consent as a 40% member, which I was formally withholding, that the company's lease on its only location was held by my company and would not be renewed under the proposed ownership structure, that I had documentation going back 5 years of being systematically excluded from material decisions, that any representation to the Lattimore Group that the company controlled its own premises was, to put it gently, inaccurate. I watched it move through the room like a cold front. The Lattimore people pulled out their phones first. Those people always have their phones on them. One of them, an older woman who seemed to be the one in charge, read for about 10 seconds and then looked up, and her face had changed completely, and she leaned over and said something to the man next to her, and he started gathering his coat. My son-in-law was still on stage. He didn't know yet. He was still talking about the future. But I could see his mother's face down in the front, looking at her phone, going grey. I could see my daughter pick up her own phone off the head table, read it, and go rigid. She found me across the room, found my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she actually looked at me. The DJ they'd hired started the countdown anyway. The crowd, most of whom hadn't gotten the email, started shouting along. 10, 9, 8. My son-in-law had stopped talking. He was staring at his mother, who was holding up her phone and mouthing something at him. 7, 6, 5. The Lattimore people were leaving, not waiting for midnight, heading for the door in a tight little knot, and one of them shot me a look on the way out. They didn't know who I was, but somehow they knew, the way you can feel where the weight is in a room. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The confetti cannons went off right on cue, paper falling all over a party that had just died, and people were hugging and shouting, and right in the middle of all of it, my son-in-law came off that stage and pushed through the crowd toward me with his face white as drywall. "What did you do?" he said. He had to say it twice over the noise. "What the hell did you just do?" The room, the part of it close enough to hear, had gone quiet. My daughter was right behind him. His parents were closing in. And I looked at all of them, this little circle of people who'd spent 5 years deciding I was a houseplant, and I said the truest 4 words I've ever said. I own this building. You could have heard a pin drop. His mother's mouth opened, and nothing came out. My son-in-law's hands started to shake. "Dad," my daughter said. "Dad, we can fix this. We can talk. Just, please, don't do this. Not tonight." "You had 5 years to talk to me," I said. "You had 5 years to talk to me. I'll volunteer badge instead." "It was a joke," he said. "The badge, it wasn't a joke." I picked up my coat off the chair. $95,000 isn't a joke either. That's what you priced me at. After everything. $95,000 to make your old man disappear so the people who never built a thing in their lives could feel like founders. His mother found a voice then. "Now you listen here. This is a business. These are business decisions. You can't just ma'am," I said, real polite, the way you talk to somebody who's about to learn something. "I've been listening for 3 years. It's my turn now." And I walked out. I want to skip ahead because I know what you're really here for, and it isn't the part where I won. It's the part after. The deal died that night, of course. The Lattimore Group ran for the hills. No serious money buys into a company that doesn't control its own front door. Without that expansion money, and with the lease coming up, the whole thing started coming apart. My lawyer fielded calls for a week. My daughter and son-in-law tried litigation at first. The in-laws pushed for it hard, but their own lawyer looked at my operating agreement and my building deed and told them, in so many words, to sit down. I held all the load-bearing walls. I always had. Then came the offer. I'll admit I didn't expect. Another restaurant group, a real one, a good one out of Charleston that I'd actually heard of, came to my lawyer. They didn't want the company. They wanted the building, that beautiful old mill on the river that I'd owned the whole time. They offered me $1.3 million for it. I had it appraised at $1.2 million. I told them 1-4 and the right to keep my granddaughter's name carved into the bar top where she'd scratched it one summer when she was little, and they laughed and said done. So the building sold, with my membership unit settled on top and the retirement money I'd kept separate all along. I walked away from the whole thing with a little over $1.5 million. I'd put in 700. Do the math. But I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. It was never about the money. The night I held that $1.5 million check, I didn't feel rich. I felt clean. There's a difference. My phone kept lighting up for weeks. My daughter's phone kept lighting up for weeks. My daughter mostly, once I sat down to type something back. I got as far as "you were my little girl and I would have given you anything," and then I deleted it and I set the phone down because some conversations are already finished and typing more words into them is just you talking to yourself. I didn't block her. I want to be clear about that. The door isn't nailed shut. But it's her turn to knock, and so far the only knocking has been her mother-in-law's lawyer, and that tells me everything about who's still running the show over there. I do think about the grandkids on that side. My daughter's boy, he's 7, and none of this is his fault, not one bit of it. I send him something every birthday and I tell him his grandpa loves him, and I mean it, and I hope someday his folks are decent enough to let me back into his life. The sins were the parents. The boy is innocent. I won't punish a child for what the adults did. I'd want you to know that about me. I live up near my son now in Tennessee. Not in his house. I bought a little place 10 minutes away, single story, easy on the knees. But I'm there every Sunday and most days in between. My granddaughter, the one who found that folder, she's 13 now and she comes over after school and does her homework at my kitchen table while I cook. She doesn't know she's the reason the whole thing came out. I'll tell her someday. For now, she just thinks her grandpa makes good chicken and dumplings, which is true. This past New Year's Eve, exactly 1 year after the gala, my son's family had me over. There were maybe 20 people, neighbors and kids, and a couple of dogs underfoot, nothing fancy. My grandson, my son's boy, he's 9, made me a place card. Crooked letters, blue marker. Grandpa. Right at the head of the table where they'd saved me a seat without anybody asking, and without anybody making a thing of it, there was real silverware. There was a chair. At a minute to midnight, my granddaughter handed me a glass of sparkling cider and leaned her head on my shoulder, and we counted down, and when it hit 0, everybody hollered, and the dogs went nuts, and for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't thinking about what got taken from me. I was thinking about what I'd chosen. I'll leave you with the lesson because I promised myself if I made this I'd be useful. For 5 years I thought being a good father meant giving everything and asking for nothing in return. I confused love with surrender. And I want to tell you, plain as I can, those are not the same thing. You can love your children with your whole heart and still expect to be treated like a human being. Generosity is not a contract for abuse. Blood does not give anybody the right to erase you. Write things down. Read the fine print. Build the load-bearing walls even when the sky is clear, because storms don't announce themselves. And when somebody shows you again and again exactly who they are and exactly what you're worth to them, believe them the first time, not the 40th. I waited until I was holding a volunteer badge in a building I owned before I finally spoke up. Don't wait that long. You were given a voice for a reason. Use it before they hand you a badge that says how little they think you matter. If any of this hit close to home, do me a favor and leave a comment. Tell me your story because somebody out there needs to hear. They're not the only one. And if you've got somebody in your life who needs to hear this tonight, send it to them. We all deserve a seat at the table. Not because we paid for it, because we earned it. For 5 years I told myself that loving my daughter meant never asking for anything back. I sold the cabin my father left me. I drained the retirement Carol and I spent 40 years building, and I called it generosity. But sitting here now, I understand it wasn't generosity at all. It was fear. I was so afraid of being alone after I lost my wife that I tried to buy my way into staying needed, and the moment I made myself a checkbook instead of a man, Whitney and Derek treated me like one. That's the hard part nobody wants to hear. People will take exactly as much as you teach them they can take. I taught them I had no bottom, and they kept digging until they hit a badge that said volunteer. The reason I walked away with everything wasn't luck, and it wasn't revenge. It was that long ago, before any of this went sour, I did the boring, careful thing. I read the fine print. I bought the building in my own name. I put a clause in the operating agreement that nobody bothered to read because they assumed the old man didn't understand his own paperwork. That habit, the one Carol used to tease me about, the one where I keep every receipt and measure twice, that's what saved me. Patience is a kind of strength most folks don't respect until they need it. I sat quiet for months when every nerve in my body wanted to flick that table because I knew the right moment was worth more than the loudest one. But I want to be careful about what I'm proud of. I'm not proud that the Lattimore deal collapsed. I'm not proud that Whitney's life got harder. I'm proud that I didn't become cruel about it. I still send my grandson something on his birthday because a 7-year-old never voted on any of this, and punishing a child for his parents' choices would have made me exactly the kind of person I was fighting. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and trampling somebody on the way out, and that line is the only thing I really had to protect. So if you take anything from a tired old builder, take this: be decent, even when decency cost you. Because the day you trade your character for a win, you've already lost the thing that mattered. Use your head before you open your heart all the way, because love without judgment isn't love, it's surrender. And when the floor finally drops out from under you, stand back up, quietly, and rebuild on ground that's actually yours. I have a real chair now, at a table where a 9-year-old saved me a seat without being asked. Nobody handed it to me. I earned my way back to it. And that, I've learned, is the only seat worth sitting in.